Armin had worked many night shifts in the small city hospital, but this night felt different from the moment it began. The wind outside was strangely quiet. The corridors inside were colder than usual, and every sound echoed longer than it should. Still, Armin continued with his work, checking patient charts and preparing medicines for the next round. He liked the night shift because it allowed him to think clearly without the noise of daytime crowds. But that night, he felt a sense of waiting, as if something unusual was about to happen. Around 11:45 p.m., the hospital lights flickered. At first, it was only for a second, but then the entire floor went dark before the backup lights slowly turned on. Several patients woke up, looking around in confusion. Armin calmed them and told them everything was fine, but deep inside he wondered what had caused the sudden power disturbance. The hospital rarely had power issues, and when they happened, they never came with such silence afterward. Just 10 minutes later, the automatic doors of the emergency entrance slid open. A group of 3 people stepped into, men in dark uniforms, and one woman lying on a stretcher. The stretcher moved silently, as if the wheels were specially made to avoid sound. The 2 men looked serious and avoided making eye contact with anyone. They spoke in brief, low voices, and their movements were sharp, like people trained for special tasks. Armin was the closest nurse available, so he rushed forward to assist. As he approached, he noticed that the patient on the stretcher didn't look like someone injured in an accident. She looked calm, peaceful, almost too controlled for someone being rushed into a hospital. Her uniform looked like a medical suit, but not like anything he had seen before. The fabric had a soft bluish-silver color that seemed to slightly change shade under the emergency lights. The 2 men nodded to Armin, almost in a hurry. One of them said quietly, "Please take care of her. She is a nurse from a specialized facility. We cannot stay long. She needs basic monitoring. She will recover quickly." Armin nodded, though he found their explanation unclear. He tried to ask, what exactly happened to her? Why is she unconscious? The men exchanged a look before one replied, "She fainted due to exhaustion. That is all." Their tone made it clear they wouldn't say more. Before Armin could ask anything else, they handed him a small sealed tablet with her basic information. No printed documents, no ID card, nothing familiar. The tablet turned on automatically when he touched it, showing her name, Nira. No age, no address, no background. Only a note requires observation. Do not question her origins. Follow normal medical care. Armin found this odd, but he couldn't force answers out of these men. They were already leaving. They walked out quickly, their shoes making almost no sound across the floor. As soon as the doors closed behind them, the room felt strangely empty. Armin turned his attention to Nira. She looked peaceful, her breathing steady, her skin smooth like someone in perfect health. But something about her stood out. Her eyelashes had a faint silver shimmer. Her hair was tied neatly, yet the strands looked softer than human hair. Her face had no stress lines, no signs of fatigue, only calmness. But her vitals told a different story. When Armin connected the monitor, he frowned. Her heartbeat pattern didn't look like any human pattern he had studied. It was steady, but arranged in a rhythm that didn't match typical health charts. Her temperature was lower than normal, yet her skin felt warm to the touch. It didn't make sense, but she didn't appear to be in any danger. He decided to stay with her for a while. Even though he had many tasks, something about her presence pulled him to watch over her. She seemed delicate and strong at the same time. Someone who didn't belong in a regular hospital bed. He checked the tablet again. Strangely, when he turned it over, there was no charging port, no buttons, no symbols. It felt like holding a small glass screen with information inside it. How did it even work? He wondered if she really came from a specialized facility or if that was just a cover story. After a few minutes of observation, Anira stirred slightly. She opened her eyes slowly. When Armin saw them, he froze. Her eyes had a depth he couldn't describe. They reflected the light in a soft, unusual way, as if layers of color moved within them. They weren't unnatural. They were simply unique. Like eyes that had seen things beyond what humans usually knew. She blinked once, twice, then looked at Armin calmly. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft, but carried a gentle resonance. Where am I? You're in a hospital, Armand replied. You fainted and your team brought you here. You're safe. She looked around, taking in the dim lights, the equipment, the quiet hall. Then she smiled faintly. I understand. Thank you for helping me. Her words were simple, but the way she spoke them felt unusually sincere. Armand noticed her gaze moved across the machines with quiet curiosity, like she was studying them. Do you feel any pain? He asked. No, she answered calmly. Just a little weakness. It will pass soon. Her confidence surprised him. Most patients asked dozens of questions or panicked after fainting, but Neera seemed completely in control of herself. She sat up slowly, and Armand was startled by how quickly she regained balance. You should rest, he told her, at least for a little while. She nodded. Yes, I will rest. But I cannot stay long. The answer raised more questions in Armand's mind, but he stayed silent. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable. He checked her pulse again. The pattern still didn't match any human measurements. He wondered if the machine was malfunctioning, but every other reading in the hospital was perfectly normal. You're a nurse? He asked gently. Yes, she said. I work on a special assignment. Again, simple words, but something hidden beneath them. She didn't lie, but she didn't give details either. As the night continued, Armand observed her closely. She didn't sleep, but she rested with her eyes half closed, breathing calmly. Whenever a machine beeped, she seemed to know what it meant before Armand even touched it. Once, a patient from the next ward cried softly. Armand was about to go check, but Neera whispered, She is frightened because she dreamed of losing someone. Just speak gently, and she will calm. Armand froze. How do you know that? Neera only smiled. Sometimes empathy is enough. The hours passed slowly but peacefully. The quietness of the night felt heavier, but not in a frightening way. More like something unseen was happening beneath the surface. Around 2 a.m., Neera stood up. I feel better now, Armand quickly approached. Please be careful. Are you sure? She nodded. Yes. My strength is returning. She walked smoothly, her steps almost too balanced, as if she had perfect control over her body. Armand couldn't stop noticing how different she was. She didn't look like someone recovering, she looked like someone adapting. They talked a little more, though she avoided every question about her background. She asked about the hospital instead, its structure, its equipment, its emergency cases. She listened with deep interest, her eyes shining quietly. Whenever Armand explained something, by 3 a.m., Armand felt strangely connected to her. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or why her presence felt so unusual. But he felt protective of her, as if she was someone far from her home and needed someone she could trust. When he left the room for a moment to bring warm water, he found himself wondering what her real story was. Why did those men appear so suddenly? Why did they leave so quickly? Why did she look different from any nurse he had ever met? And why did he feel that this night was only the beginning of something unexpected? When he returned, Neera looked at him with calm eyes, as if she knew he had questions, but also knew he wouldn't push her. And she was right. Armand didn't push. He only said, If you need anything, call me. I'm on duty all night. Neera smiled softly. Thank you, Armand. You are kind. Her voice carried warmth, gentle. Sincere, almost comforting. Armand didn't know yet that this moment, simple as it seemed, was the first step into a story that would take him far beyond anything he had imagined. A story where a simple compliment would change everything, and where an alien nurse would nearly collapse because of a human emotion she wasn't prepared to feel. But that part of the story was still waiting ahead. The next few hours passed quietly, but the calmness of the hospital night carried a strange weight. Armand stayed close to Neera, making sure she had everything she needed. He brought her warm drinks, checked her vitals repeatedly, and ensured she was comfortable. Yet, the more he observed her, the more he realized that nothing about her followed normal human patterns. Her heartbeat, her breathing, her body temperature, everything seemed slightly off, but nothing indicated illness. She appeared completely fine, almost too fine to be true. While adjusting her blanket, Armand noticed her eyes scanning the machines in the room. She didn't just glance at them. She studied every meter, every screen, every blinking light with a depth that suggested understanding beyond his own. It was as if she could read the subtle signals of the equipment, feel the energy within the circuits, or even sense the information the machines were holding. "You're very attentive to these machines," Armand said casually, trying to make conversation. "Most people here wouldn't notice half of this." Nira looked at him and smiled faintly. "They are tools for understanding life." "I like to know how life is measured." Armand paused. The words sounded normal, but her tone carried a quiet wisdom he had never encountered. It wasn't arrogance. It was calm and precise, like someone who had seen and experienced far more than ordinary human life allowed. He nodded slowly. "I understand. I've been here a long time, but it's rare to meet someone who pays attention like you do." She turned her gaze toward him for a moment. "Observation is important," she said softly. "It helps one understand how to help." Armand was struck by her choice of words. She spoke simply, yet the meaning behind her sentences carried depth. She didn't just talk about observing machines. She spoke about understanding life itself. He couldn't help but feel that she saw the world differently, and that her thoughts were far more complex than her simple words suggested. As the night went on, Armand tried to engage her in small talk, but Nira's responses were always carefully measured. She avoided personal details and instead asked about the hospital, the patients, and the procedures. She was curious about human life in ways he had never considered. "Do humans get tired often?" she asked at one point, tilting her head slightly. "All the time," Armand replied, a little surprised by the question. "Doctors, nurses, everyone. Some nights are harder than others. You get used to it eventually, but it can be exhausting." She nodded, as if absorbing the information seriously. "And emotions? Do humans always feel the same emotions?" Armand hesitated. This was a question he hadn't expected. "No. Emotions are complicated. They change depending on what's happening, who we're with, and how we think. They can be confusing, but they also make life meaningful." Nira's eyes reflected a kind of curiosity that made him pause. "Interesting," she murmured. "Emotions as a measure of meaning. I must study this." Armand couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration and unease. She wasn't human, he realized fully now, and yet she had an extraordinary capacity for understanding people. There was a subtle intensity in her gaze, the kind that made him feel like she could see right through him, yet without judgment. As the night deepened, another nurse came in to check on the patients. Armand stepped aside to update the chart, and Nira quietly observed the nurse's movements. She seemed to memorize every action, noting the rhythm, the efficiency, and the precision with which tasks were performed. She even corrected minor mistakes silently, making subtle gestures to adjust things perfectly without drawing attention. Armand noticed this and asked, "Do you have experience with medical work?" She looked at him calmly. "Yes, I have experience with care. Observation and precision are essential for saving lives." The simplicity of her answer hid something extraordinary. He realized she was far beyond typical human training. Her abilities were precise, almost perfect, and her attention to detail was astonishing. Every small action, every glance, every movement was calculated and deliberate, yet natural and graceful. At one point, a patient in the next ward became agitated and started shouting. Armand immediately went to calm the situation, but Nira followed silently. When he asked if she wanted to stay back, she shook her head. "I will help. Calmness is necessary for recovery." Watching her approach, the situation was remarkable. She didn't speak loudly or command attention. Instead, she moved with a quiet authority, observing the patient's reactions, adjusting her tone and posture to provide comfort. Within minutes, the patient stopped crying, soothed not by words but by her presence. Armand was stunned. He had seen many nurses calm patients, but never like this. There was something about her energy, something beyond human understanding that made people feel secure. Even he felt it. He felt calmer just standing near her. Later, during a brief break, Armand brought her a cup of warm tea. He offered it quietly, smiling. Here, it might help you relax a little. Nira accepted it gracefully. She held the cup with both hands, inhaling the steam slowly. Thank you. Humans often use comfort as a way to care. I find this fascinating, Armand chuckled. You're full of questions tonight. You must have a lot of curiosity about humans. I do, she admitted softly. Everything is new and intriguing. How humans feel, how humans react, how humans care. It is all worth observing. The conversation continued gently, but Armand noticed a subtle change in her demeanor. She seemed less mechanical now, more thoughtful, more aware of the presence of others. There was a kind of warmth slowly entering her movements, small gestures that suggested she was beginning to connect with human emotions. Even if she didn't fully understand them, he realized that her curiosity wasn't just academic. She was learning about humans in a personal way, noticing small details, reading subtle expressions, and even responding in ways she hadn't been trained to at one point. He asked, "Do you ever get tired of observing?" She looked at him and smiled faintly. No. Observation brings understanding. Understanding brings purpose. Even if it is difficult, it is necessary. Her answer was simple, but Armin felt the depth behind it. She wasn't just a nurse or a patient. She was something else entirely, someone who had been trained to see beyond the ordinary. Yet now was beginning to experience ordinary human life for the first time. Hours passed, and the night grew closer to dawn. Armin continued his watch, but he found his thoughts drifting more and more toward Nira. There was something about her calmness, her curiosity, her unusual presence that made him feel a strange mix of wonder and protectiveness. He wanted to know more about her, to understand her, yet he knew better than to press. He watched as she adjusted her position slightly, resting her head against the pillow. Even in rest, her posture was perfect, balanced, and composed. Yet there was a softness in her breathing now that hadn't been there before, a subtle sign of human vulnerability. Armin realized that despite her extraordinary abilities, despite her calm perfection, she was still capable of feeling, still capable of experiencing, still capable of being affected by the world around her. He wondered what it would be like to see the world through her eyes, to feel her perspective, to understand how she processed every detail of human life with such precision. It was fascinating, and a little intimidating, as the early light of dawn began to seep into the hospital corridors. Armand felt a new sense of responsibility. He wasn't just watching over a patient, he was witnessing someone extraordinary. Someone who had come from a place beyond his understanding. Someone whose presence challenged everything he thought he knew about life and care. And he realized, without fully knowing why, that this night was only the beginning. The questions he had about her origins, her abilities, and her presence were not going to be answered immediately. But one thing was certain. She was learning from him, and he was learning from her. The night had shown him that some encounters were rare, some connections unusual, and some presences unforgettable. Nira, with her calm eyes, quiet strength, and subtle curiosity, was one of those presences. And even as the sun began to rise outside, painting the hospital in soft gold, Armin knew that the hours ahead would bring new surprises, new challenges, and perhaps new understanding between them. For now, all he could do was watch, observe, and care, and that was enough. The morning after the long night was quiet, but filled with a soft energy that Armand couldn't explain. The hospital corridors were less crowded than usual, and a gentle golden light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows that moved slowly along the walls. Armin had stayed by Nira's side for most of the night, making sure she was comfortable, and he had grown accustomed to her calm presence. It was almost like the room had its own rhythm, one that slowed whenever she was near by mid-morning. Nira had changed into a fresh uniform, one that was a soft sea-green color. Armand noticed it immediately. The color was soothing, gentle, yet it seemed to complement her in a way that was subtle but striking. He paused for a moment as she adjusted her sleeves and straightened her posture. She looked. There was a quiet elegance in the way she moved, a smoothness that was both natural and precise. Her uniform, simple as it was, enhanced that impression. Armand had always been observant, but he hadn't expected to feel such a strong reaction to a uniform color. It wasn't about attraction in the usual sense. It was about noticing someone's presence, someone who seemed extraordinary. He found himself compelled to speak. Without overthinking, he said, "You look perfect in that color." The words left his mouth casually, almost as if he had said something ordinary. Yet the effect was immediate. Nira froze. Her hands, which had been adjusting her sleeves, stopped mid-motion. Her eyes widened slightly, and her normally calm face went pale. Armand blinked, shocked. He had never seen her react like this to anything before on Nira. He asked, stepping closer, "Are you okay?" She didn't respond right away. Her breathing became slightly irregular, and she steadied herself by gripping the edge of the counter. Her eyes, which were usually so composed and deep, now held a shimmer of something unfamiliar, something like surprise mixed with an emotion he couldn't name. "I am fine," she whispered finally, though her voice trembled just slightly. Armand frowned, sensing that she wasn't fine. "You don't look fine, did I say something wrong?" Nira shook her head quickly. No, it is not wrong. It is unexpected." Her words were careful, but they carried weight. Armand didn't understand completely, but he felt that a simple compliment had affected her in a way he could not yet comprehend. He took a deep breath and tried to remain calm, but inside he was curious and concerned. "Unexpected?" he asked. "In what way?" For a moment, she seemed to struggle. She looked down at the floor, then back at him, her hands trembling slightly. "In my culture, that phrase carries meaning. Emotional meaning. Something. Not for casual use. Not from someone untrained." Armand's mind raced. "Your culture," he repeated. "You mean you're not from around here?" She looked at him, her calm composure slowly returning. "I am not from here," she admitted softly. "I am from another place. A medical research team far from this world. My mission is to observe human healing, human life, but not to form emotional connections." Armand stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. His heart beat faster, partly from surprise, partly from curiosity. He had suspected she was different, but hearing her admit it was something else entirely. She wasn't human in the way everyone else was. She came from somewhere beyond Earth, somewhere he couldn't imagine. I see," he said slowly, trying to remain steady. "I didn't know. I just said what I felt." "I didn't mean to." She raised her hand slightly, stopping him. "No, it is not your fault. Your words are sincere. It is just overwhelming. I am not trained for this reaction." Armand realized then that his simple human instinct to give a compliment had a profound effect on her. She wasn't used to human warmth, two words that carried emotion rather than data or instruction. And now she was experiencing something deeply human for the first time. "Didn't mean to overwhelm you," he said softly. "I just noticed you. You look calm, and your uniform suits you. That's all." Her eyes softened slightly, though she still looked uncertain. "It is difficult. I am not used to such expressions. In my world, words are precise. Observations are precise. Emotions are controlled. To hear them unexpectedly, it can be intense." Armand nodded, understanding a little better. He hadn't realized how powerful his simple words could be. He had always thought compliments were harmless, ordinary gestures of kindness, but with Nira, it was different. She was experiencing something entirely new, something that stirred feelings she didn't fully understand or know how to handle. He decided to give her space, stepping back slightly. "I understand," he said. "Take your time. You don't have to respond right away." Nira nodded, and for a few moments they stood in quiet silence. The only sounds were the soft hum of the hospital equipment and the distant footsteps of other staff in the hallways. The golden morning light reflected off her uniform, highlighting its gentle color, and for Armand, the sight was almost calming. He realized that he had a responsibility now, not just to care for her physically, but to respect her emotional boundaries as well. After a few minutes, Nira straightened herself and took a slow breath. "I must adjust," she said softly. "I must process this human experience. It is new and unexpected, as I said." Armand smiled gently. "I understand. And if you need anything, I'm here." Her gaze met his for a moment, and he saw gratitude in her eyes. It was subtle. Not like a human expression he was familiar with, but it was there. He sensed that she trusted him, even if only slightly. And that was enough for now. They continued their morning quietly, working side by side in the ward. Nira observed patients, adjusted equipment, and assisted with routine care. She was precise, efficient, and calm, but Armand noticed a subtle difference. Her movements, which had always been perfect and controlled, now carried a softness he hadn't seen before. It was as if the small human interaction the compliment had opened a tiny window into her emotional world. Armand couldn't help but watch her. He felt a strange mix of curiosity, admiration, and concern. He had met many nurses and medical professionals before, but none like Nira. She was extraordinary, not just in skill, but in presence. And now, he realized, she was experiencing something profoundly human for the first time, emotion triggered by words, by mid-morning. Nira had recovered her composure. She moved with her usual precision, assisted patients efficiently, and even offered guidance to junior staff. Yet whenever she looked at Armand, there was a flicker of acknowledgement, a subtle reminder that their interaction had left an impression. At one point, a child patient cried softly in the corner. Nira approached slowly, her movements gentle but deliberate. She knelt beside the child and spoke in a calm voice. "It is all right. Everything is all right." The child stopped crying almost immediately, comforted not just by her words, but by her presence. Armin watched silently, realizing that her ability to calm and care was extraordinary, but now it carried a new layer. Her human exposure, brief though it was, seemed to enhance her empathy. She was beginning to understand, in her own way, the subtle power of emotions. As the morning wore on, Armand and Nira continued their quiet routine. He brought her tea, adjusted her workspace, and occasionally spoke to her about human life and hospital routines. She listened attentively, asking questions with sincere curiosity. Every now and then, her eyes would flicker toward him, a subtle acknowledgement of their earlier interaction. Armin understood now that small gestures, small words, could have a powerful impact on her. His compliment had been simple, but for Nira, it had opened something entirely new. She was learning to navigate human emotions, and he was learning how to approach her with care and respect by late morning. Armand realized that their connection, however brief and delicate, had changed the atmosphere in the ward. There was a quiet warmth, a sense of calm and understanding that wasn't there before. Nira's presence was extraordinary on its own, but now it carried a subtle human layer, fragile yet profound, and Armand knew that this moment, this morning, was just the beginning. Their story was unfolding, slowly, carefully, in ways neither of them fully understood. One small compliment had opened a door, and through it, something entirely new and unexpected was beginning to grow. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know how Nira's world and his own would intersect. But for now, he watched her, quietly fascinated, quietly caring, and quietly aware that this encounter was far from ordinary. The day had begun to settle into a quiet rhythm, and the hospital corridors felt calmer than usual. Armand moved from room to room, checking on patients and ensuring that everything was running smoothly. Yet his mind kept returning to Nira. Her presence, extraordinary and calm, continued to occupy his thoughts. He realized that the morning's events, the compliment he had given, and her subtle reaction had changed something between them. It wasn't something he could define, but it was tangible. Nira, meanwhile, continued her work with focused precision. She checked patients' vitals, administered care where needed, and organized equipment with a smooth efficiency that seemed almost effortless. Yet Armin noticed subtle differences in her behavior. Her movements, while still precise, now had a gentle warmth. When she spoke to patients or staff, her tone was softer, infused with a quiet empathy that hadn't been there before. It was as if she was learning something new, something profoundly human. From the simplest gestures and words. At one point, Armand approached her while she was adjusting a patient's bed. "You're doing this very naturally," he said softly. "The patients seem calmer when you're around." Nira paused, looking at him for a moment before replying. "It is different now. I did not expect that human interactions could have such an effect." Armand nodded. "It's strange at first, but humans respond to care, and sometimes to just small acts of kindness." She absorbed his words quietly, her gaze thoughtful. "Kindness," she repeated softly, testing the word. "It carries. Meaning, it influences behavior. It affects emotions." "Exactly," Armand said. "Sometimes it's not about instructions or procedures. Sometimes it's about being present, listening, or even just noticing someone." Nira tilted her head slightly, as if considering the idea. "I understand. Presence, observation, attention. These are forms of care." Armand smiled faintly, noticing how she was beginning to process emotions in a way he hadn't expected. "Yes," he said. "And it seems like you're learning quickly. Maybe faster than most humans." She offered a faint smile, but there was a hint of shyness in it. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet for Armand, it was significant. He realized that she was beginning to trust him, not fully, but enough to share in small, quiet ways. Later, while taking a break in the staff room, Armand brought Nira a cup of tea. She accepted it with a polite nod, but instead of drinking immediately, she studied it. "In your world," she said softly, "humans consume liquids not only for sustenance, but for comfort." "Yes," Armand replied, intrigued. "Sometimes a warm drink can make someone feel better, even if they aren't thirsty. It's more about the feeling it gives than the actual need." Nira's eyes softened as she held the cup. "This is interesting. Simple actions carry deeper meanings than I initially thought." Armand realized that these small moments were teaching her about human emotions in ways that words or data never could. She was observing, processing, and beginning to understand the intangible aspects of humanity, the warmth, the care, the small gestures that built trust and connection. After the break, a minor emergency occurred in the ward. A patient had experienced a sudden drop in blood pressure. Armand rushed to assist, and Nira followed immediately. Together, they worked efficiently, monitoring the patient's vitals and administering care. Her movements were precise, faster than he expected, yet she remained calm and composed, her focus absolute. Once the patient was stable, Armand stepped back, catching his breath. "You handled that very well," he said. "Most people would have panicked." Nira's eyes met his. "I observed your actions earlier," she said. "Your calmness helped me respond appropriately. I learn. From you, as you observed from me." Armand felt a warmth in his chest at her words. There was an unspoken connection, forming a silent understanding that went beyond words. They were learning from each other, not just in medical practice, but in human understanding, as the day continued. They worked side by side, and Nira began to share small details about her world. She didn't go into specifics, but she spoke about the principles of her medical team. Their emphasis on precision, observation, and understanding. She described how their methods were highly advanced, how they studied healing processes with care, and how they avoided unnecessary emotional entanglement. "It is not that emotions are forbidden," she explained, "but that they interfere with objective observation. Our work relies on clarity, control, and efficiency. Human emotions are unpredictable." Armand nodded slowly. "Yes, they can be unpredictable. But they're also powerful. They can change how someone heals, how someone responds, how someone feels about life. Sometimes emotions are as important as medicine." Nira considered this carefully. "I see that now. Your actions, your words, small, simple gestures, they have influence beyond the immediate. I am beginning to understand this effect." Armand felt a sense of awe. Here was someone from another world, highly trained and advanced, slowly discovering the subtleties of human life through everyday interactions. He realized that even a person with extraordinary abilities could be touched by simple human kindness. Later, while walking through the ward together, Neera noticed a young child struggling to eat. She knelt beside the child, her movements gentle but precise, guiding the utensils and speaking softly. Armand observed quietly, impressed by how naturally she adapted her advanced skills to such delicate situations. The child, previously fussy and resistant, ate calmly, comforted by her presence. Afterward, Armand approached her. "You didn't need to do that, but it helped," he said. Neera looked at him and nodded. "I wanted to try." Observation alone is not always sufficient. Presence and action, they matter. I understand that more clearly now. Armand smiled. Exactly. Sometimes it's not about efficiency. It's about being present, noticing someone, giving care, even in small ways. They continued through the ward, working quietly but in sync. Armand realized that he was no longer just her observer or caregiver. Their relationship had evolved into a subtle partnership, one built on trust, learning, and mutual respect. By late afternoon, Armand felt a quiet satisfaction. The hospital was calm, patients were stable, and Neera was adapting remarkably well. Yet he sensed that the most important changes were internal subtle shifts in understanding, awareness, and emotional perception. Neera was beginning to experience the human side of care, something she had never been exposed to before, and he was witnessing it firsthand. During a quiet moment, Neera paused beside a window, looking outside at the fading sunlight. "This world," she said softly, "it is. Unpredictable, yet beautiful. Humans experience life in ways that are unexpected. Emotions, connections, even small gestures. They hold meaning I did not anticipate." Armand joined her, quietly observing the same scene. "Yes," he said. "It's messy sometimes, but it's meaningful. And sometimes even small actions can make a difference in ways you might not expect." She nodded slowly. "I am beginning to see that. Even as an observer, I can participate, not just in procedure, but in understanding life itself." Armand felt a quiet warmth at her words. It was remarkable to watch someone so advanced begin to grasp the subtleties of humanity. He realized that their bond, fragile though it was growing stronger not through dramatic events, but through simple, shared experiences. Moments of understanding and mutual respect. As the day ended, Neera returned to her room to rest briefly, and Armand prepared the ward for the evening. He paused for a moment, reflecting on everything that had happened. The compliment he had given earlier had been a small, casual act, yet its impact had been profound. It had opened a door, allowing her to experience a human connection, however briefly. And it had begun to shape the way she interacted with the world around her. Armand realized that their story was evolving in quiet, meaningful ways. He didn't know what the future held, but he understood that this day, the first day of shared understanding, had laid the foundation for something significant. And in that quiet hospital, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the corridors filled with soft shadows, Armand felt certain that the bond forming between him and Neera was something extraordinary, something rare, something that neither of them would forget. The day had shown him that even someone from another world, trained to avoid emotional entanglement, could be touched by simple acts of human kindness. And he knew that the days to come would continue to deepen this connection, revealing more about her world, their understanding, and the quiet power of shared presence. The next morning, the hospital was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes small sounds feel louder than usual. Armand walked through the corridors, checking on patients and ensuring the ward ran smoothly. Yet his thoughts kept returning to Neera. The night and day they had shared together had formed a subtle bond, one that was quiet but unmistakable. There was a gentle warmth in her presence that lingered in his mind, and he realized that even in ordinary hospital routines, her presence had made a difference. By mid-morning, Neera was preparing herself for something that Armand could not yet see. There was a quiet determination in her movements, a precision that suggested purpose. She moved through the ward, checking equipment, organizing charts, and assisting patients as she always did. Yet there was a faint tension in her posture, something that made Armand pause and watch her closely. He approached her gently. "Nira, is everything all right?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her usual calm expression in place, though her eyes revealed a hint of emotion. "Yes," she replied carefully. "Everything is in order. But soon, I must return to my world. My assignment requires it." Armand felt a sudden tightening in his chest. He had known this day would come, yet hearing it spoken aloud made it real. You have to leave?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Yes, I have been observed, cared for, and guided here. But now, my mission continues elsewhere. I must depart." Armand struggled to find words. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would express the connection he felt, but nothing seemed enough. He simply nodded, trying to maintain his composure. "I understand," he said softly. Nira took a slow breath. "I want to thank you, Armand. Your kindness, your words, your care. They have allowed me to understand human emotions. Your actions have influenced me more than I expected." Armand felt a warmth spread through him at her words. It wasn't just gratitude, it was understanding, acknowledgement, and something deeper he could not yet define. I'm glad I could help," he said quietly. "You've taught me too, in ways I didn't expect." They walked together through the ward, moving quietly past patients and staff. Nira's presence was calm and composed, yet Armand could sense the subtle layers of emotion beneath her surface. She had always been precise, almost perfect in her actions, but now there was a human softness in her movements. It was as if the brief exposure to his words and care had awakened something within her, a capacity for emotional depth that she had never experienced before. At one point, they reached a quiet room with a window overlooking the city. Nira paused, looking out at the horizon. The sunlight glimmered softly, reflecting off the glass and creating a gentle warmth in the room. Armand joined her silently, watching the same view. "This world," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is unpredictable, yet beautiful. Humans experience life in ways that are different from my world. Emotions, connections. They hold meaning I did not anticipate. Your presence, your words, they've shown me this." Armand felt a lump in his throat. He had never expected his simple actions to have such an impact. "I didn't know it would mean so much," he admitted quietly. She turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting the soft light. "Even the smallest gestures can have profound effects. I understand now that even I, trained to avoid emotional entanglement, can be influenced by your sincerity, by your humanity." Armand swallowed, trying to steady his voice. "I'll miss you," he said honestly. Nira's expression softened. "And I will remember you, Armand. You have given me something beyond data, beyond observation. You have shown me connection, trust, kindness, human warmth." A quiet silence filled the room, heavy with unspoken emotions. Armand realized that this was a moment they both understood, even if words were insufficient. Their bond was subtle, fragile, and yet undeniable. Soon, the same officials who had delivered Nira arrived. They moved quietly, precise and efficient, as if nothing could disturb their purpose. Nira stepped forward, her posture calm, though her eyes betrayed a hint of hesitation. "It is time," one of the officials said softly. Nira nodded, turning to Armand one last time. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady yet filled with meaning. "For everything." Armand stepped closer, struggling to keep his emotions controlled. "Take care of yourself," he said, "and maybe one day we will meet again." She offered a small smile, one that carried warmth, gratitude, and something deeper that he could not fully name. "Perhaps," she said softly. "Perhaps." As the officials guided her toward the transport device, Armand felt a mixture of awe and sorrow. He had come to admire her, respect her, and quietly care for her in ways he hadn't expected. And now she was leaving. Before stepping into the transport, Nira paused and turned back to him. "You look perfect in every color," Armand," she said, repeating the words he had spoken to her earlier, though this time with deliberate meaning. The words struck him in a way he couldn't describe. They were simple, yet profound. They carried emotion, recognition, and an unspoken connection that bridged their worlds. Armand nodded, unable to speak, feeling the weight of the moment settle around him. She gave a small nod, then stepped into the transport device. The machine hummed softly, the light around it shimmering, and in a blink she was gone. The corridors were quiet again. The golden sunlight continued to filter through the windows, but Armand felt a strange emptiness. The presence that had made the night and day so extraordinary was gone. Leaving only memory and the subtle echoes of connection, he returned to his duties. Moving through the hospital with quiet efficiency. Patients needed care, charts needed updating, and routines continued, yet, in every step, every action, he carried the memory of Nira, her calm strength, her precision, her curiosity, and the brief but profound bond they had shared stayed with him. As he worked, he realized something important. The story they had shared, brief as it was, had taught him more about connection, care, and the subtle power of words than any experience he had had before. Even a small compliment, a simple act of kindness could change someone in ways unseen. And sometimes, those changes were more powerful than anything measured by science or routine. By evening, the hospital returned to its quiet rhythm. Armand paused by a window, looking out at the city below. The sunlight had faded, replaced by the soft glow of streetlights and distant buildings. He felt a quiet hope, a small flame that perhaps, someday, their paths would cross again. Even though Nira had returned to a world far beyond his understanding, her influence remained. In his actions, in his words, in the way he observed and cared for patients, there was now a subtle reflection of the lessons she had taught him: the power of calm presence, the value of empathy, and the importance of trust. Armand knew that life would continue. Patients would come and go, shifts would pass, and routines would remain. Yet he carried with him a quiet knowledge that he had witnessed something extraordinary. He had met someone from beyond his world, someone who had been touched by his words, and who had, in turn, left a mark on him that would not fade. As he prepared to leave for the night, he glanced at the spot where she had been. The room was empty, the air still, yet the memory of her presence lingered. He whispered softly to himself, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they had shared. "Thank you, Nira. Wherever you are, may you find your path. And may we meet again?" And with that thought, Armand stepped out of the hospital, carrying with him the extraordinary memory of the alien nurse who had nearly collapsed at a simple compliment, and the quiet truth that even in the smallest interactions, the power of connection could transcend worlds. The story, while ending here in action, continued to live in memory and emotion. The hospital would return to its ordinary rhythm. But Armand's life and heart had been touched in ways that were extraordinary, subtle, and unforgettable. And in that quiet, invisible way, the bond they had formed remained. A testament to the quiet power of human connection, care, and understanding.